And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Have to get to more of these top breaking news headlines on this Friday night. Live picture there at the White House. So this is what we now know. Take a look at the post on Truth Social from the president. He says this: the highly anticipated meeting between myself as President of the United States of America and President Vladimir Putin of Russia will take place next Friday, August 15th, 2025 in the great state of Alaska, saying further details to follow. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So we did some digging here at Live Now. I had the question, when was the last time Trump and Putin were in the same room? Take a look at this piece of video here. This is back in Japan, in Osaka, at the G20 summit there, June of 2019. You see at the time his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, his Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin. So that was the last time we had a Putin-Trump face-to-face sit-down 6 years ago. Back on live there to the White House. We were also wondering, when was the last time Vladimir Putin stepped foot on U.S. soil? That was back in 2015 on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly with then-President Barack Obama here. So this is going to be quite something. Now, remember, the last time Putin met with a U.S. president was back in 2021 with President Biden. That was back in Geneva. So we kind of outlined you the rundown of when this has all gone down. It's important to know that context, as now Putin coming to the United States, Alaska, to meet with President Trump. Will a ceasefire be resolved? Will they agree to anything over the matter of the war in Ukraine? That remains to be seen. Well, the governor of Alaska, the Republican Mike Dunleavy, saying this: I welcome the upcoming meeting between President Trump and Russia's President Putin being held here in the great state of Alaska. Alaska is the most strategic location in the world, sitting at the crossroads of North America and Asia, with the Arctic to our north and the Pacific to our south. With a mere 2 miles separating Russia from Alaska, no other place plays a more vital role in our national defense, energy security, and Arctic leadership. What happens in the Arctic and the Pacific impacts Alaska before the rest of the country. It's fitting that discussions of global importance take place here. For centuries, Alaska has been a bridge between nations, and today we remain a gateway for diplomacy, commerce, and security in one of the most critical regions on Earth. The world will be watching, and Alaska stands ready to host this historic meeting. So, message there from the Republican governor of Alaska, Mike Dunleavy. So, in the meantime here, I want to talk about all of this in addition to this historic breakthrough between the countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia, the leaders of those countries in the White House today, alongside President Trump, in this Trilateral summit, this peace pact between them, ending decades of civil strife between the two countries. So we'll get into that in a little bit. This is somewhat overshadowing that news. I want to bring into the conversation there at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Peter Doran. He joins me. Peter, good to see you. I know we've been making you wait a lot. Had to get you on live to talk about this momentous occasion. We'll get to Azerbaijan and Armenia in just a moment here. Are you surprised this meeting is taking place on U.S. soil?
Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. Frankly, the moment that the White House announced that President Trump would meet with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, that made a lot of sense. There were some other international cities that were being tossed around as potential venues, but the pick for Alaska makes sense. Let's also remember, in that history lesson you were giving, Alaska used to be Russian territory. It was purchased by the United States. It's become our 50th state. Well, it joined in the 20th century, but the venue is important. More than that, though, this is perhaps the highest stakes meeting that President Trump has had since he took office for the second time in January. He is going to have make a decision at this meeting whether or not he accepts a fair deal from the Russians or he walks away from a bad deal that Vladimir Putin might put on the table. It's going to be a hard choice for him to make in the middle of these negotiations next week.
But do you think that's going to be on the table in this introductory meeting, this foray, this first foray? You think they're going to meet that all out?
Well, there's no other reason to actually meet with Vladimir Putin
Okay.
unless there is a deliverable, unless there is something of substance and action that can come from this. Let's recall, Andrew, President Trump has gotten really tired of talking, and having more talking with Vladimir Putin. What he wants is action. He has said very clearly the time for talking is over. We also had indications that perhaps maybe the Russians have offered to trade land for peace. We do not know what's on the table to be traded. I'd also stress it is against Ukraine's constitution to give up any of its territory.
Right.
So early indicators are that the Russians are going to propose something that will be very difficult for Ukrainian President Zelenskyy to sell back home politically to his people. And the final catch here is that the Ukrainians can't change their constitution to allow a land swap while there is a war. So President Trump's going to have to thread a very narrow needle in order to make the breakthrough that he's hoping for in Alaska next week.
Peter, you've made the case in many of your writings that throughout the course of the last almost 7 months of the Trump 2.0 administration, Putin has been just tapping Trump along, not budging very much here. All indications point to, in what you've described, that there's going to have to be some give or take, some leeway, that Putin is going to have to bring something to further this along. All along in our conversations and in our reporting, a lot of experts like yourself have told me Putin is not serious about ending this war. He doesn't want to.
And I think that's the trap that Trump must avoid when he meets with Putin in Alaska. Let's recall, as President Trump has been having a phone conversation, sometimes 90 minutes, sometimes 2 hours long. It's a long call between heads of state. Vladimir Putin has been launching missiles and attack drones against Ukrainian cities, all the while talking peace on one hand and attacking the Ukrainians on the other. President Trump very clearly does not like this game. And the way I think it helps to understand, Putin would be delighted to keep Trump on a diplomatic merry-go-round, spinning and spinning in circles and not making any progress. Trump is going to have to break out of that cycle, but most importantly, he's going to have to be like Ronald Reagan negotiating with Mikhail Gorbachev back in the 1980s. You may recall there was a bad deal on the table. Reagan had the courage to walk away from that bad deal in Reykjavik, Iceland, and Trump may have to do the same if it's clear Putin is not serious about truly ending this war.
But Trump is very transactional in nature. He wants to end the war. So how might we be so sure that he would walk away from a bad deal? He seems to just want a deal.
And that is a card that Vladimir Putin hopes to play. Okay. But let's recall here, though, that Putin doesn't really have a lot. He is facing significant economic consequences that Trump has announced. These would include very punishing tariffs on all countries who are buying Russia's oil and gas. This is something that Vladimir Putin wants to avoid. So President Trump has raised the stakes, and now it really does fall to Putin to either accept those terms or face the consequences. So from Putin's perspective, he doesn't really have the choice of walking away. He's got to actually show real action or, again, face those consequences.
Yeah, what a time capsule. Only 6 years ago, Trump and Putin in Osaka, June of 2019. You see Sergei Lavrov, his longtime foreign minister, to his side. I'm imagining Lavrov will be in attendance for this here. I have to ask, because it was reported, the messaging from the White House, according to some of the reporting out there from Politico yesterday, Peter, was that a precondition was going to have to be set on any meeting between Trump and Putin. That precondition was going to be Putin and Zelenskyy would have to meet first before a Trump and Putin meeting. Trump was later asked about that in the Oval Office later in the day, and he denied that. He said, no, that's not going to be the case. Do you think we'll see a Putin-Zelenskyy meeting come out of this Trump-Putin meeting at all? Do you think we'll see that in the offing in the near term? Now, remember, Peter, Zelenskyy and many Ukrainians are touting the one-year mark since the Kursk offensive was launched. That was the first time in the war in Ukraine between Russia that Ukrainian forces took Russian territory. Not much territory, but they took it. They hold it and still hold it. And so you can make the argument that Are we or aren't we going to see after this a Putin-Zelenskyy bilateral?
Well, Andrew, right after that announcement hit the wires, Vladimir Putin, through his spokespeople, threw a lot of cold water on that idea. Let's recall, Vladimir Putin doesn't really want to meet with Zelensky. The goal here is to have a face-to-face with Donald Trump. If you're the old spy master like Vladimir Putin is, if you're very practiced at negotiations, from your perspective, you want to get into the room with President Trump and hope that the personal interaction can achieve goals that you haven't been able to, make real yet. The real goal here for Putin, the prize, is to meet with Trump, not necessarily to meet with Zelensky. Now, for Trump, from Trump's perspective, he wants to have that trilateral negotiation. He wants to be the deal maker in chief. He wants to have Putin on one side, Zelensky on the other, and be seen as the peacemaker, something he promised he would do when he came into office last January for the second time. So Trump wants that trilateral meeting. Putin doesn't. Right now, all of his attention is going to be on the meeting in Alaska with President Trump. And after that, we'll have to see what comes from that meeting, because if nothing happens, there will be no trilateral summit.
So, Peter, lastly on this point here, the fact that Zelensky, Ukraine, won't be represented in this face-to-face between Trump and Putin, are you worried, are your colleagues worried who cover this war so closely that Ukraine is going to be forced into some kind of unilateral, unconditional surrender? Is this going to be a forced peace on them, on Ukraine?
Well, that is one of the dangers that President Trump has accepted in order to meet with Putin in Alaska.
Okay.
You know, Andrew, there's an old saying in U.S. diplomacy when it comes to Europe. It is not about us without us. Many European countries squeezed in between Russia and larger Western European states often complain throughout history that big deals have been made at their expense. And they often recall that phrase, not about us without us. And unfortunately for Ukraine, that is the optic for this meeting in Alaska. Now, whether or not we see positive results from that, well, it could assist Ukraine in bringing an end to this war that Russia started.
Yeah.
But Trump is breaking that iron rule of not about us without us in order to meet with Putin in Alaska.